Think about the last time you spent money on something and immediately felt guilty about it. Not a huge purchase, maybe just dinner out, or a shirt you didn't need, or something small you ordered online at midnight. And the thing is, you could afford it. You're not in a crisis, but that feeling showed up anyway. That quiet little voice that said, you probably shouldn't have done that. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you spend freely and then quietly wonder why you can't seem to hold on to money no matter what you do. Why saving feels like swimming upstream. Why every time you get a little ahead, something pulls you back. Here's what I want to talk about today. That's not a discipline problem. That's not laziness. That's not some character flaw you were born with. That's your financial identity. And most of it was formed before you even realized you were paying attention. We spend a lot of time in the personal finance world talking about the mechanics, the budgets, the apps, the savings percentages, the debt payoff strategies. And those things matter. But they treat money like it's a math problem, when, for most of us, it's an emotional one. The conventional advice sounds like, just spend less than you earn, invest the rest, and you'll be fine. And technically, that's true. But it ignores the fact that most of our money behaviors aren't really about money. They're about what money meant to us growing up. They're about the stories we absorbed, often silently, in our teens and early 20s, from our parents, from our environment, from what we had and what we didn't. There's this idea in psychology called a financial schema. Basically, it's the mental blueprint you use to interpret and respond to financial situations. And the uncomfortable truth is that most of that blueprint was drawn up years ago, often during your 20s or even earlier. And you've been running on it ever since. The reason this matters isn't to give you something to blame your parents for. It's because you can't change patterns you don't understand. And a lot of people spend decades fighting their own financial behavior without ever asking, where did this come from? Let's slow down here and really get into this, because I think it's the most underrated piece of financial literacy that almost nobody talks about. Your 20s are formative in a very specific way. You're probably earning real money for the first time. You're making decisions independently. You're watching how other people around you handle money. Friends, partners, co-workers, and underneath all of that, you're carrying the blueprint you were handed as a kid. Think about what money looked like in the house you grew up in. Was it something that was talked about openly, or was it tense and private? Was there enough of it, or was there always a low-level anxiety about whether there would be? Did you watch a parent save diligently, or spend freely, or swing between both? None of those things are neutral. They become emotional associations, and emotional associations drive behavior in ways that pure logic just can't override. Here's a simple example. Say you grew up in a house where money was always tight. Scarcity was the background noise of your childhood. What that often produces, not always, but often, is one of two things. Either you become very anxious about spending, even when you're financially comfortable, because some part of your nervous system is still waiting for the floor to fall out, or you develop an anti-scarcity response. You spend freely, maybe impulsively, because subconsciously, money feels like something that slips away anyway, so you might as well enjoy it now. Both of those responses make complete sense given the experience that shaped them. Neither is a moral failure. But if you're not aware of the pattern, you'll keep acting from it without ever questioning whether it still serves you. Now flip it. Say you grew up in a house with financial comfort. That doesn't automatically produce good money habits either. It can create a blind spot around risk, or a normalized relationship with debt, or an assumption that things will always work out. I've seen plenty of people from financially stable families hit their 30s completely unprepared for how fragile financial security actually is, because they never had to think about it before. The 20s are also when you start absorbing the culture around money from your peers. You see friends buying things you can't afford, or can afford but shouldn't. You feel the pull of keeping up with lifestyles, with aesthetics, with what a certain kind of adulthood is supposed to look like. And that peer mirroring, it's powerful, especially in a world where social media makes everyone else's financial choices highly visible and your own doubts very private. There's also the issue of your first real financial experiences, your first paycheck, your first credit card, your first time really struggling or really thriving. Those moments leave marks. The first time you felt the relief of having a financial cushion, or the first time you felt the panic of not having one. Your brain files those experiences under, this is what money is, and then it writes rules. Spend fast before it disappears. Save everything because you can never trust stability. Avoid checking your bank account because the anxiety of knowing is worse than not knowing. Invest aggressively because playing it safe is what keeps your family stuck. These aren't random behaviors. They're adaptive strategies that made sense once. The problem is, they tend to follow you well past the context that created them. Here's the mindset shift I want to offer you, and it's a gentle one. Your financial behaviors, even the ones that feel like personal failures, are actually pretty rational responses to the experiences that shaped you. The overspending, the avoidance, the anxiety, the undersaving, the risk aversion, or recklessness. None of it came from nowhere. It came from somewhere real, and that realization does something important. It moves you from self-blame to self-awareness, which is where actual change can start. Because the goal isn't to shame yourself into better habits. The goal is to look at your current financial behavior and ask a new question. Not, why am I so bad at this? But, what story am I still living by? And is it still true? A person who grew up in financial scarcity doesn't need to keep protecting themselves from scarcity if they now have a stable income and savings. But the nervous system doesn't know that, unless you teach it. A person who grew up with financial comfort doesn't need to stay naive about risk just because that naivety was comfortable, unless they decide to look at it directly. This is the work. It's not dramatic, it's not overnight, but it's the kind of change that actually sticks, because it's rooted in understanding rather than willpower. And here's the thing about willpower with money. It runs out. Rules that come from discipline alone tend to break under stress. But when you actually understand why you're making a change, and you can see the old pattern for what it is, a relic, a past tense story, the grip it has on you starts to loosen. So what does this actually look like in practice? Because I don't want this to just be interesting. I want it to be useful. The first thing worth doing is just getting honest about your money story. Not in a therapy speak way, but genuinely reflecting. What did money feel like growing up? What message did you absorb about wealth, spending, or saving? Was money associated with safety, or stress, or freedom, or shame? You don't have to excavate your entire childhood. Even just sitting with that question for 5 minutes can reveal something. The second thing is to pay attention to where your financial patterns cause friction in your current life. Not where you think you should be doing better, but where you actually notice resistance, avoidance, or stress. Those friction points are usually where old stories are running on autopilot. Maybe it's checking your accounts. Maybe it's having money conversations with a partner. Maybe it's the guilt after spending on something you enjoyed. Those specific moments are worth examining. Third, and this is a practical one, try separating the emotion from the mechanics just a little at a time, not all at once. But if you're someone who avoids their finances because it's anxiety-producing, even just scheduling one 15-minute weekly money check-in can slowly desensitize that reaction. Not to fix everything, but to make the discomfort smaller. Familiarity reduces fear over time. Fourth, be honest about your current risk tolerance and think about where it came from. Risk tolerance isn't just about investment portfolios. It's about how you approach financial decisions generally. Are you overly cautious in ways that might be costing you long-term growth? Or are you undercautious in ways that leave you exposed? And more importantly, is that where you consciously want to be? Or is it just where you landed? Finally, and I think this one is underrated, talk about money with people you trust. Not to compare or compete, but to normalize the conversation. So much of the shame and silence around money comes from the belief that everyone else has it figured out. They don't. Most people are working through the same fog with their own inherited scripts, trying to make sense of it one paycheck at a time. I want to leave you with this. Your relationship with money isn't fixed. It's not a personality type. It's a set of learned patterns, shaped by experiences you didn't always choose, in a world that doesn't always explain the rules clearly. And the fact that you're thinking about it at all, that you're here, asking these questions, means you're already doing something that a lot of people never do. The financial identity you built in your 20s wasn't wrong. It was your best available response to what you knew and what you experienced. But you don't have to stay loyal to it forever. You're allowed to update the story. Progress with money rarely looks like a dramatic overnight transformation. It looks like one slightly more aware decision. One conversation you were willing to have. One moment where you caught an old pattern running and asked, wait, is this actually what I want? That's enough. That's actually what change is made of. You don't have to be perfect with money. You just have to be a little more honest with yourself than you were yesterday, and then again tomorrow.